Me. Hi, Jennifer. This is Kathy Menike from Passaic Valley. I hope you can see and hear me.
We can. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Passaic Valley. How are you?
Very good. Sorry, there's an assembly going on, so there's all this noise going on. So my students are going to be arriving in about 5, maybe 10 minutes, just because there's an assembly that's getting out. So I'm doing very well. I hope you're doing good too, and we're excited for today.
Wonderful. So we're waiting, and no problem. Just go ahead and mute yourselves, and the program will start around 10. And we have one other school connected, and I believe we're waiting for at least one more. And there's Hempfield. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
How are you guys?
Awesome.
Good. Glad
Good
to
morning,
hear it.
Jennifer.
Good morning, Helen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Just saying hello to all your smiling faces at the schools this morning.
Oh, goody. So who's with us so far?
Who is with us so far? We have, it looks like Passaic Valley High School. We have, I believe, Centerville. Is that right? Centerville, are you on? There you are. That's what I thought. Centerville and one other, and I'm not sure. It's coming up as Keswick? There they are, yes.
So Michael said that Londonderry couldn't join us this morning.
Correct.
And I had heard earlier from Egg Harbor Township that they weren't going to be able to join us. So I think that all three are signed on then that are joining us for today.
I think you're right. I think you have everyone. Although the kids at Passaic are still being let out of an assembly, so they will not actually be present for a few more minutes.
It's okay, we can wait.
It doesn't.
Okay,
watch.
good.
Right.
Okay. What? No, we're not on yet.
And the lunch ladies are so cute.
Oh my God, that was so nice.
We watched all the Holocaust remembrance all yesterday. She's here, take cookies. And is Carol going to be over here?
Yes. That's so cute.
Yeah. Cookies. I don't know if you want them now or later. Everything, right?
I think maybe we shouldn't be eating while we're talking. What do you think, Michelle?
Over here. Then you'll eat. You have to eat something.
Okay, we will.
And Helen, I'll just remind you that you are unmuted currently.
Okay.
I'll never.
Passaic Valley is ready.
Everybody's ready, Jen?
Everybody's ready, Helen. I think you're ready to go.
There you go. So, good morning. My name is Helen Kirschbaum, and I'm the Education Director of the Goodwin Holocaust Museum and Education Center. We're located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is just over the river and a little bit east of Philadelphia. And we are happy to be joining you this morning from Sterling High School, one of our partners in education, and we're also happy to be partnering with the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education and MAGPI as we begin today's conversations about the Holocaust and the many lessons that we need to learn from this period in history. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that MAGPI is recording today's program and also ask that each school please introduce yourselves, tell us where you're located and who's with you in the classroom. So Centerville Middle School, why don't you start us off?
Hi, we're from Centerville Middle School, and we're doing kind of like a, I don't know how to say, it's kind of like a historical fiction kind of program kind of thing, I don't know what to say, unit. And we are all reading books from World War II, so that's kind of cool. And Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
Glad you got that part in there. And Centerville, what grade are you?
7th grade.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Passaic, would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, we're from Passaic Valley in Little Falls, New Jersey, in Miss Menike's class.
And what grade are you in, Passaic Valley?
It's a combination of sophomores and juniors.
And freshman.
And one freshman, just one.
Okay, we don't want to forget that person. Thank you. Keswick High School, would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Hi there, grade 12. Start now. Hi there, grade 12, Genocide and Crimes Against Humanities course. We're about 20 minutes north of Toronto, Ontario.
Well, thanks to all of you for joining us today. It seems like we are spanning the globe, actually. Let me now introduce the two speakers who are joining us. On my left is Erna Analik. She is a Holocaust survivor, and she lives in our Cherry Hill community, and she's going to share her experiences with you. On my right is Estelle Laughlin, and she is actually joining us from Chicago today. She has come to Cherry Hill to be our community Yom HaShoah speaker, which is Holocaust Memorial Day speaker. And so she was kind enough to join us and talk to some of the students while she's here. So I think you will hear that both of their experiences were very different. But I'm going to ask each of them to speak to you briefly, and then we will take questions when they're both finished. So, Mrs. Analik, why don't you start us off?
All right. Good morning. I am originally from Czechoslovakia. That's where I was born, brought up, and we had a wonderful, wonderful life there. But then in 1940, the Hungarians occupied that area of Czechoslovakia, and also the Germans came in about the same time. That's when our problems started. We were very, very limited in what we could do, and there were a lot of restrictions. First of all, they confiscated all radios, so the only news we could get was whatever the newspapers were allowed to print. So we didn't really have an awful lot of knowledge of what was going on during the war in that area. But once in a while, we did get some news. For instance, the Jews of Slovakia, which was right next to us, they were taken before us. And the Germans, what they did was they took them out of the cities and towns. They made the people dig these big pits and lined them up at the edges and shut them down. That's how they got rid of a lot of people at one time. By the time we had to leave our home and go into a ghetto, things have changed. By that time, the Germans have developed the death camps, like you probably heard of Auschwitz and Majdanek and many others. So in 1944, in fact, it was April 24th, 1944, as I was leaving home to go to school for my final exams, there were placards and loudspeakers all over town saying that all Jews have to report immediately to a central
location.
Yes, and that was in a lumber yard. Of course, the lumber yard was not equipped to house so many people, so we were just on the lumber yard, sleeping outside, living outside on the lumber yard. We were there about 6 weeks, and after that, we were told, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that when they told us that we have to report to this lumber yard, we were allowed to take only what we could carry with us, which was very, very little, of course. Anyway, about 6 weeks later, they told us, gather all your things, we are going to the railroad station. They would not tell us where we're going, why we're going to the railroad, but they put us we walked to the railroad station. They put us in these trains or cars that had no seats, no toilets. It was like cattle cars, I suppose. No windows on these trains. So, and there must have been at least 100 people in each car. So we all had to stand, could not sit down anywhere, and the trip took 3 days and 3 nights. There was no water, no food, no toilet, not even a seat. After the 3 days, we arrived the train stopped, and we arrived at the place where they opened the car doors, and there were a lot of German people, uniformed people. We didn't at that point know where we are, but it turned out that we arrived at Auschwitz. At Auschwitz, when we got out of the train, they separated men from women and older people and very young people from all the others. They kept, I would say, people between 14, 15 years up to about maybe 30, because they picked those to eventually work for the Germans, slave labor. That was actually the last time that I had seen my family, my parents, mother, father, an older sister, and a much younger brother. But I stayed with one older sister that was close to my age. We were taken into they said shower. That shower actually was also used to gas people. Instead of having water come out of the shower heads, they had gas. And we found out much later that that's where my mother, my older sister, and younger brother were taken. But I was with my sister, and we had our heads shaved off, taken all our clothes, everything we had, and they gave us a gray sack dress. I don't even know if you could call it a dress, a garment. No underwear. We got wooden shoes, no socks, nothing like that. We were put into a barrack where we were housed in, again, you tell me every time, but they call bunks. But these were very special bunks. We were housed in bunks, about 6 people in one bunk. They were wooden bunks, and they were 3 tiers of bunks. We stayed there. The group I was in actually did not work in Auschwitz. So all we had to do is every morning, very early, between 4 and 5 o'clock, I suppose. We had no clocks, so I don't know exact times. But we had to go out very early every morning, line up, and we were counted. They called this a sale appel. They wanted to make sure that everybody is present, because if you got sick or something happened or you escaped, which was probably impossible because they had electric fences, but they still counted us every morning and every night. And after that, we went back into the bunks, got a piece of bread and what they called coffee. And we had, as I said, we didn't work, so we just stayed there all day. And this went on again until we got to Auschwitz on May 19th, 1944. So again, about 6 weeks, and we were taken to the railroad again, and were taken into Germany to work on railroad tracks, clearing debris, and such work. Very manual, not pleasant work. And food was again the same every day. We stayed there not very long. I don't know how long it was, but then one day several men came to the camp and said that they need 500 women to come and work in Essen, Germany, where the Krupp ammunition factory was. My sister and I were picked to work there. So we were taken to Essen. The camp we stayed in Essen was about 4 miles from the factory. When we first came there, they had a streetcar that took us to work. But the streetcar was bombed out not too long after we got there, so from then on, we walked every morning to the factory and back at night. If anybody got sick, they were taken out of camp and we never saw them again. So it was very, very difficult, especially because we had no food and no water at all. Every time we asked for water or were trying to find water, they said, don't drink it because it's all contaminated. You'll get very sick. So we were afraid to drink it. So as I say, for almost a whole year, excuse me, almost a whole year, we did not drink water. In the winter, one day, there was an air raid, and whenever there was an air raid, and there were many of them because Essen was an industrial town, so it was being bombed a lot. But this particular night, there was an air raid, and the SS people who guarded us went into shelters, but we were not allowed to go into shelters. So that evening, one of the women at the camp approached my sister and me and asked if we would like to escape. So we said, how could we escape? She said, well, she knows somebody that she knows from the factory where she worked at Krupp, and this man apparently told her that if the occasion comes where he can help us, he would. So 6 girls escaped, my sister and I and 4 others. We were fortunate because it was at night and there was an air raid, so most people, almost everybody was in shelters. So when we walked to a cemetery in town, there were no people out. Nobody saw us because if we had seen, if they saw us, they would probably know that we are from the camp. Next morning, we slept there. Next morning, this friend who asked us if we want to survive, who knew this German gentleman, and my sister went over there and told him that we escaped and we are hiding in this building in the cemetery, but we need help. So he would come every morning with a bottle of water and a potato or a piece of bread, and he did that for about 5-6 days, but then he came and said he really cannot do it anymore because all the food was rationed, and he didn't have enough to give us. He said, but you can come to the house, and he had a farm, a small garden where he grew vegetables. We went there, and then another girl who was with us told him that there was another gentleman in the factory who also said he knows somebody who would help us. So we had to go find this person. We were very lucky. We did, and he took 4 of us in. The others went to different places. We never found out where the other 2 went. And this gentleman who took us in, he had a housekeeper who cooked and took care of us. They treated us very, very well. And we stayed there until liberation. Is that time for us? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. and remembering that this man was risking his life by taking you
Not
into
only
his
life,
home.
but he was risking his whole family's life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Estelle, I think your experiences were very different from Erna's, but we'd like to ask you to tell the students a little bit about what happened to you during the war, and we will take questions from the classes after she's finished speaking.
Hello. What a small world. This meeting with you here reminds me of the fact that we really, because of the fact that the world is so small, getting smaller now, that we are each other's rescuers, and we are all responsible to make this small globe of ours a happy home for each one of us. I thank you for being here and giving me a chance to share my story and share my book, Transcending Darkness, A Girl's Journey Out of the Holocaust. I am sharing my story for several reasons. I am sharing my story with the hope that you will be uplifted by the courage and love that shines through human beings, even in the worst times. I am here to honor the millions of innocent people, including my family and friends, who were killed because they were the wrong religion, without any means to protect themselves and without the help of others to protect them. But mostly, I tell my story because as we are here today, there are people who are suffering cruelties and death. Perhaps my story will serve as a reminder of people who are in harm's way today, and mostly to remind us that how important the courage of each one of us depends if the world is to be a more civilized place. I will share with you glimpses of my experiences in the Warsaw Ghetto, events that led to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and how my family and friends, how my family ended up in Majdanek, an extermination camp. I was told that the theme of today's presentation is rescue. In a way, I was rescued by my fellow men by example of excellence, and their examples of excellence and courage is what kept my soul alive and what helped me survive whole, with compassion, with love for humanity and joy for life. And indeed, life must be lived joyfully. I was born in Warsaw, Poland. Warsaw was the center of my universe and glows in my selective memory in golden radiance of lilac trees against open blue skies, air filled with fragrance, rich sounds of good neighbors, kindness, and faith and love. These memories later became shelters in my mind in a world crumbling around me. You see, when you lose everything, your memories become your possessions. I had just turned 10 when Germany invaded Poland. Immediately, my life changed beyond recognition. My once peaceful streets were then patrolled by soldiers with whips, rude soldiers with whips and guns. They walked into our homes, helped themselves to whatever they wanted to, like common thieves, and yet they called us Jewish people greedy. They rationed all food, closed schools, made books illegal. We had no telephones. We couldn't reach anyone in case of emergency. We had no transportation. We had they confiscated all radios and closed all newspapers. We lived in virtual darkness, cut off from the world and everything that was happening in the world. They isolated us in a tiny ghetto and called it the death box. They built a thick wall around us at our own expense and filled the ghetto with Jewish people driven out from surrounding areas. Most people came on foot, many without shoes on their feet and without a penny in their pockets. Little children, no older than 4, with bare knees and bare feet, stood in street corners and begged and yammered. Most people died of cold and starvation and illness. Typhus ran rampant. People covered the bodies of dead children with posters saying, "Children are the holiest thing. Our children must live." Yet in this inferno, people found heroic ways to fight back. We couldn't fight back with arms. There were just no arms. The only guns that were available were pointed at us. But people fought heroically. It was a spiritual fight. Immediately, the Jewish community in Warsaw instituted a far-reaching self-aid center. Everyone was expected to help, and everybody helped. Even there was in our building, Poland, Warsaw, like most European large cities, was very old, and most people did not live in private homes, but in apartment buildings. Every apartment building had a committee. Everybody helped. In my building, there was not a child over 10 who did not help. Guns hovering over our heads did not stop us from celebrating holidays. We simply pulled our window shades down and we celebrated. On Passover, in our building, there was matzah in every house. To own a book was an act of defiance punishable by death, and many defied. In my book, I am rushing and summarizing most of the incidences, but in my book, you will meet all the people who were involved in creating a culture that was nourishing in spite of the cruelties. To own a book was an act of defiance punishable by death. Yet all over the ghetto there were secret libraries. My father had a stash of his favorite books and read to us generously. Nights, windows blinded with covers to keep our existence secret. My father, our family, sat in a tiny room illuminated by a tiny carbide light. We sat in an invisible embrace. My father's voice flowed with swaddling comfort, bringing to us remote worlds. Our room was like a capsule of paradise, separating us from the darkness outside our windows. It was curfew, of course. Schools were forbidden. Yet all over the ghetto, there were teachers, unemployed teachers, who met with children in small cold rooms and taught them to hold on to their imaginations and their faith and love. We even, the self-help centers even supported theaters. Imagine theaters when there was no bread. I don't recall the place at the age of 11 or 12. I doubt that I understood the complexities of the place, but I still remember the magic that the actors created on the tiny stage under a carbide light of a floodlight. There was a famous, very eloquent and wonderful historian in the ghetto, Chaim Kaplan, who wrote that it is strange when we don't seem to need it at all. We need poetry more than bread. And that is so true. The soul needs to be nourished as much as our bodies need to. In July 1942, the month of my 13th birthday, things became even more cruel. This was the beginning of the infamous Warsaw Ghetto deportations. We had no idea what the fate of the people who were deported was going to be. Some Jewish people were forced to write false letters to families, inviting them to camps where they were fed and clad. And you can imagine how the streets were littered with hungry, starved, homeless people, that many people thought that that would improve their fate in some ways. So they reported voluntarily, so to speak, but it wasn't, they had no idea that meant the end of their lives. But most people I knew hid. People hid in the most outlandish places. We hid in drawers, we hid in cupboards, we hid in closets, we hid between box springs and mattresses, anywhere that we could disappear from the from being visible. The deportations proceeded with 20th century know-how and Stone Age values. I do not have the time to describe them again. If you're interested, you'll find the descriptions of the deportations and how the people responded to them. We had no idea what was happening to the people who were wrenched away from us. All we knew was that they were taken to a place called Umschlagplatz and loaded onto freight trains. And of course, we were hoping that they would be taken care of. Some people came back. They came back from the dark, unknown place. They had to do it secretly at night for fear that they would be caught and turned over to Nazi authorities. They came back and they told us. They told us about the horrific train rides to a place called Treblinka, where the people were gassed. When people became aware about Treblinka, the Jewish people, just at that point, the deportations between July 1942 to September 1942, a mere 2 or 2.5 months, 99% of the children, of the Jewish children, disappeared from the face of the earth. can you imagine a world without the sound of children, without grandparents, because children and old people were the first ones to be killed? When it became common knowledge that Treblinka, the Jewish people in the ghetto, began to organize themselves into armed resistance. My father was a member of the armed resistance. The fighters built bunkers for entrenchment and for hiding. They dug tunnels between the bunkers, and they dug tunnels underneath the wall to be able to get to the other side of the wall and get from Christian people arms. They also used the sewers a great deal. Events erupted. Well, actually, there were a couple of skirmishes prior to the eruption of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. There were a couple of skirmishes, and as a punishment to the Jewish people for the skirmishes, Himmler decided to cleanse the ghetto of all Jews in 3 days in time of Hitler's birthday. Events erupted with German forces entering the ghetto. They came in with columns of soldiers and tanks and armed vehicles and warplanes, and they asked us all to voluntarily report for resettlement. Of course, we knew better. And we also, my family had a bunker, and our bunker had a trap door to the basement. It was the powder room door, and all lifted, and we stepped into the Netherlands. So when the announcement was made, we pulled the trap door down. You can imagine how the damp walls closed in on us, how the ceiling pressed down on us, the flickering, the tiny carbide light was our substitute for the sun. The clicking of the clock was our only clue when the sun was rising. It was our only contact with the universe. And when the day was ending, while we were in the bunker, fighting erupted on the streets against a 20th century force armed from head to toe, against warplanes, against tanks, stood this tiny band of freedom fighters, poorly clad, poorly fed. They ran out into street corners. They stepped on tops of rooftops. They stepped in front of open windows. They crawled through sewers and through the tunnels and lobbed Molotov cocktails and fire throwers and whatever they had. There was no limit to the courage of the young fighters. Even after Hitler declared the Warsaw Ghetto completely cleansed of Jews, fighting still was erupting. It is noteworthy that it took the Jewish fighters fought longer than it took for France and for Poland to capitulate. At some point, a grenade was thrown at our trapdoor, and we were dragged out through the ghetto that was crumbling to our feet, loaded onto freight trains. We were taken to Majdanek, where my father was gassed by some unbelievable set of circumstances. My mother, sister, and I were sent to other camps. I do not have the time to describe how we eventually were liberated, but I can only tell you that we waited for the liberation from September 1939 till January 1945. It was a miracle, but the miracle was not at all, I imagine, as you would imagine it to be. But it was interesting, and and you can read about it. And I eventually, how much time do I have?
You're almost finished.
I am okay. I can tell you that we after the liberation, we had to do a lot of wandering, and we reunited with two cousins who were very clever and very brave. They were able to obtain permission to live in their own house in an attic. Other people were occupying their house, and they were permitted to stay in the house, not out of kindness, but when my cousins walked into their house, they recognized even the curtains that their mother bought before the war, before they were chased out. They recognized every knick-knack on the wall that was hanging on ordinary nails, you would think, just the kinds of nails you would find in a hardware store. But these nails were not ordinary nails. They were all made out of gold that my uncle, their father, shaped, and the people who lived in the house had no knowledge of that, but they knew that my uncle and my cousin's family had a lot of treasures hid there. So they permitted my cousins to stay there and had a plan to cut their throats. My cousins were fully aware of it, and they accepted to take the risk, and they had their own plan. Obviously, their plan worked, and this is why I'm here to tell you my story. And I hope that you'll have the interest to read my book and learn more about it. I want to thank you for listening, and I recognize how hard it is to hear and share such stories, but we have to be reminded from time to time what can happen to the conscience of a nation if we accommodate ourselves to dictators, what can happen to love and trust. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. I know it's not easy to share your experiences, but I'm sure that the students have lots of questions and have already learned so much from you. Centerville, I'm going to ask you to start us off. Do you have a question for our speakers?
How did liberation feel for both of you?
Okay, so they're asking if you can describe how liberation felt. Want to start?
Well, for me, as I say, I was at that time, at that point, still living with the German family, and it was in the first week in May, so the weather was beautiful, and up to then, we did not go outside much because we didn't want anybody to see us. But we went out that morning, and we saw soldiers and tanks, and we were scared because we didn't know who they belonged to. Were they German or not? But then we found out that these were American soldiers, American tanks, liberating the people of Essen. So that was a wonderful feeling, of course. and from then on, things have gotten much better.
Estelle, how about you? Where were you when you were liberated, and how did it feel?
I was in a town called Częstochowa in Poland. Liberation was overwhelming. It was frightening. It was hopeful. It was a feeling of reaching out. The fear was we had no homes, we had no place to return to. We were so hopeful to find people that we were separated from. We were so fearful that we would never find them. It was. You can imagine the gates opening. It's the middle of January. Poland is quite cold. The ground was covered with snow and ice, and we were cold. All we had was a kaftan and wooden clogs. We were hungry. We looked. I tell you, the thing that was most touching were the open horizons. You know, freedom has a texture. Freedom is such a precious thing. I think that we are not aware of the preciousness of life, of each life, the sacredness of life, and the sacredness of freedom until we are at the precipice of losing it. I can tell you that during the time of deprivation, inside we were no different than all of us are here today. Inside we all craved for it, even more so. Just imagine when you're hungry, and if you miss a lunch, how much you crave for more. And when you are very hungry, how much more you crave it. The same thing is inside we craved all of these things, and now the gate was open, but still it was not home yet.
Thank you. Passaic Valley would like to give you a turn to ask a question.
Hi, my name is Matt, and first off, I'd just like to thank you very much. We all appreciate what you're doing for us, and being able to hear first account stories like this is very different than just learning things in a classroom. How hard was it for you to deal with all the emotions that came to mind while you were writing your book, and to just tell stories about it and think back? Does it bring back a lot of emotions and memories from when that was all going on?
It brought back an avalanche of emotions. It was also very cathartic. I was wondering, how did we survive with love and joy for life and compassion? And I found that seeing the child that I was through the eyes of the old woman I am now, I recognized the wisdom of children, the ability to see right from wrong, the resilience of young people, and that I think that goodness that is in all of us is our only hope. I have to believe that there's goodness in every one of us. I am also aware that we are capable of great cruelties, and we see it in everyday life, probably in your own classrooms, in our own world. So this was the hopeful sign that I found in writing my book. I have also it also brought to me back the wonderfulness of the people that I met in the ghettos, the righteous people, on whom the saving, on whom the healing of the world depends. And of course, it is you and me.
Thank you so much. Keswick High School, would you have a question for us?
Yes. Hi, my name is Madison, and we just like to thank you for everything and sharing your experiences with us. My question is, in your own opinion, what can we do to remember the Holocaust?
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to start. Remember to mute your mics if you're not speaking. What is it that the kids can do to remember the Holocaust?
I think that the most important thing I can think of that you could do is that you should get involved when you see any injustice anywhere, any discrimination, whether it is religious, racial, any kind at all. If you don't be just a bystander, do something about it. You know how wrong that is, and just make sure that you do get involved and do your best to prevent any kind of discrimination that goes on.
Thank you. Estelle, how would you answer them?
My answer is that you have the answers in a way as well as I do. The very fact that you are here, the very fact that you are listening, the very fact that you are reading books about it, the very fact that you are caring is the first step. And so you are doing the right things. And I have every trust that your generation, because you are better listeners, and perhaps also because, in a way, we had definitely too many wars, and the mere thought of more wars with the arms that we have today is absolutely frightening. So I think you're doing the right thing by staying informed, by wanting to know, by caring for one another. And I am so thankful to the museum and to the United States Holocaust Museum and to this museum that you have here that I heard is doing such outstanding jobs, and to Helen and to all the people here, that we all have to do our part. You know, as long as Darfur happens, Majdanek and Auschwitz are still with us. And there are still people who are saying the Holocaust never happened. But you, by staying informed, and the museum is proof that history always listens and history always remembers. And we must listen, and we must do our part if civilization is to progress.
Thank you. Centerville, we're back to you for the next question.
Hi.